time management. We've been talking about time management. Everyone talks to you about time management. It's key. With respect to exams, there's the semester time management of preparation begins on day 1, and you've got to leave time for creating the course summary, and you want to be done in time to use it to study. You've heard about that already. There's also the time management of allocating your time among the various questions, and then allocating your time within each question. For example, if your professor tells you there'll be 3 essays of equal length, then you know on a 3-hour exam you probably want to spend an hour apiece. You don't want to spend 2 hours on the first essay if it's only worth 1/3 of the points. Okay? Many law students in their first set of exams lose track of time. You don't want that to be you. Okay? Sometimes professors will give you time allocations. Sometimes they'll give you point allocations. Either way, pay attention. If it's only worth 1/3 of the points, you don't want to spend more than 1/3 of your time on it. It is unlikely you will ever get a perfect law school answer except on possibly multiple choice. On an essay, you're never likely to get a perfect answer because there's always more than one. So you rather get 90% of the points and move on than get 96% of one and none of the last because you ran out of time. I cannot stress to you enough the importance of allocating your time among the questions and sticking to it. Beyond that, once you decide you're going to spend an hour on this question worth 1/3 of the exam, how do you allocate your time within the question? I promise you that at your first exam, there's going to be someone who opens the essay, reads through it once, opens the blue book, or starts typing. And other people are going to get nervous and say, oh my God, she's already writing. I better be writing. No. A substantial, and I mean substantial portion of your law school exam time in any question is reading, thinking, and organizing. Students who start writing at the beginning often get halfway through and say, oh, I missed that. Cross out, start over. If you have limited space, you've just wasted a ton of space, let alone time. So generally speaking, read, think, and organize. As you read, make note, what's the question? Was it a general call, I'm looking for anything? Was it a specific call, I'm looking for specific stuff? Make notes. Unless you are told you may not, unless you are told you can't write on the exam, make notes on it. Actually write on the piece of paper with the question. Circle things, but make a jotting of why you're circling it. For example, if it were an offer and acceptance question, go through and circle and say, offer question mark, add question mark, acceptance question mark, termination question mark. But don't just circle or underline, because then you haven't identified why and you have to go back and spend more time thinking about it. If you take the extra second to make a jotting, oh, offer, just an O in a circle, you'll remember when you look at it again. And when you get to the point of writing later on, you can go back to your facts and say, oh, there are my offer points. So read the question carefully. I always recommend you read the question twice. Now, I'm going to stress this because I think it's really important. The first time you read the question, read it slower. Consciously read it a little slower. Many people read over things or misread things. And if you do that the first reading, your brain will do it the second reading. You are unlikely to be able to catch it until some amount of time has passed and you can look at it fresh. So if you read it wrong the first time, even though the words are different, you'll see it wrong the second time. So I know it's hard, you feel time pressure, but take an extra minute or two to read it slowly and carefully and make sure you're reading what's actually there. Not what you want it to be there, not what you hoped would be there, but what's there. As you go through it, make those notes and ask yourself, talk to yourself, have a conversation, do it in your head. Your classmates won't like it if you start mumbling out loud. But have a conversation, say to yourself, why did she include that fact in the exam? What's the relevance of that? Now, there may be one or two red herrings, facts that are thrown in that really have no relevance. But on a law school exam, most of the facts are there for a reason. So if you find you're only focusing on 3 of the 17 facts in your problem, go back. You're missing something. In a contracts question in particular, focus on the timing, when things occurred. Contracts questions follow a process. You have to create the contract, then you can figure out what the contract said and whether people did it, and then you have breach. Timing in your problem has to be provided to give you an idea whether this is a formation issue and a question of whether we properly formed it, or whether this is an established contract and the question is whether you breached it. So particularly in contracts questions, focus on timing. And I'll repeat this several times today. Answer the question you are asked. You might write a perfect answer to another question, and you will get few, if any, points because it was not the question asked. You're totally right, but you're not relevant. So answer the question you are asked. I told you need to spend your time reading, thinking, and organizing. How do you organize your answers? Do you do it by timeline? Do you do it by person? It depends. If you're dealing with, for example, an offer and acceptance question, well, chances are you're doing a timeline because offers have to come before acceptance. You can't have an acceptance before you have an offer. So those tend to be chronological questions. On the other hand, if you have one of these kitchen sink criminal law questions where all of these bad things happen and you have 3 people and you have to say which crimes did each of them commit, that question you might more properly want to deal with by person, or you might even want to do it by crime. Again, as you prepare your course outline and summary and as you synthesize, you'll get ideas as to the ways you want to organize and structure different types of questions. A real important note, a couple of real important notes on writing out your answer. Number 1, a lot of stuff is going on in your head, and you've made a lot of notes. You have to make sure that you put complete answers in the blue book or on the typed exam. I have found many, many people have made notes on their outline, and then when they get to the actual exam, they just write the conclusion. And when we go back and look at it together, they say, but I knew that. And when we pull out their scrap paper, sure enough, it was there on the scrap paper. But I don't grade the scrap paper. So the whole answer has to be included in the exam book. If it's in your head, it might be right, but there are no points for it. So make sure you are actually putting down onto the paper the complete answer, not just the conclusion or a part of it. Okay? One of the ways you make sure that you are not only identifying the issue and stating the applicable rule, but that you are using the facts is my favorite Wizard of Oz joke. The most important word on a law school exam is because. Every time you state a rule, you should say it's satisfied because, it's not satisfied because. And after that because, there should be a fact. This fact shows you X, Y, or Z. This fact means that. Use the facts. Apply the facts. Don't just state these facts are there. Use them to show why things are met or not. Because. Beware of pronouns. Be very careful of pronouns. I have had students talk about 2 male characters in a question and then say, he. Who's he? Which one? I don't know. I cannot make assumptions when I grade your exam. I can only give points for what is on the paper. And if it is unclear, I can't give you points. So be very careful when you use pronouns. Oh, and use headers and paragraphs. And if you don't believe me, go back and look at the Hadley versus Baxendale case and tell me it wouldn't have been a heck of a lot easier to read if they'd added a few more paragraphs. Remember, we are sitting there reading, many of them typed these days, but still many handwritten, pages and pages and pages. And the more reader-friendly you can make it, the better off you are. If I have to scan your handwriting and try to figure out the words, I lose the flow of what you were saying. So if you have messy handwriting and are allowed to type, you might want to type. If you're going to use abbreviations, make sure your professor allows it, and make sure you define them the first time if they're not commonly accepted abbreviations in your classroom. As for structure, how do I structure the answer? You might hear about things like IRAC and CRAC or CREAC or all sorts of acronyms. Those are designed to be paragraph structure guidance, okay? IRAC, for example, stands for Issue, Rule, Analysis, or Application, Conclusion. Issue, Rule, Analysis / Application, Conclusion. That is not for the problem I list all my issues, all my rules, all my analysis, all my conclusions. No. That is for every single issue. I should state a rule, analysis, application, conclusion. And they should be discrete paragraphs. Also, you need to prioritize. If you get one of those general kitchen sink essays where you're going to get to raise every issue you can find, prioritize. If you spent 7 class periods talking about A and 1 talking about B, you should spend more time on the exam discussing A than you should B. Because I'll bet that in most of the circumstances, there are more points available for A than for B. So use common sense and good judgment when you take your exam. It seems that law students want to check that at the door when they enter an exam. Don't. Bring yours with you. Use it. IRAC or CREAC are very good for certain kinds of questions. But they're not good, for example, on a policy question. And if your professor says he hates IRAC, don't mention it. Don't say you're using it. It's still important to remember to assert your issues and rules and give an analysis and conclusion. But you don't have to call it IRAC if your professor hates IRAC. Okay? One of the most common problems I see on first-year exams is the brain dump. Students get into the exam and they want to show me, I learned everything you told me. Let me show you. Let me throw up on paper. I'll give you credit for it. I am sure you have memorized everything I've said. But that's not going to get you a good grade on the exam. Because I'm not looking for a regurgitation of what I said. I'm looking to see if you can apply it to the next set of circumstances. If you can recognize which of those is relevant in the fact scenario and then apply it. If you can distinguish from what's relevant from what's not and then give me a good statement of the rule and give me a good application of these facts, why these facts satisfy it or don't, why they're similar to the case that satisfied it, why they're different, why it might be like that case, but this one thing makes it hard. That's what I'm looking for.